In the quiet folds of Asia's forgotten corners, where incense still curls through cracked temple doors, and bells echo long after their ropes have rotted, the dead do not rest in silence. They murmur, they linger, they wait. This is where stories are not told, they are whispered. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, a realm where each tale carries the scent of rain on ancient stone, where karma walks barefoot through funeral smoke, and every shadow has memory. Here, horror is slow, sacred, unseen. And tonight, we forge a bell not to call the living, but to summon what lies beneath them. A story shaped in bronze, echoing with sin, and bound by the curse of a man who gave the dead their voice. Light your candle, close the door, and listen closely, because once the bell rings, it remembers you. There was a bell that rang before Arun was born. No one pulled the rope, no wind stirred the iron chain. Yet on the seventh night before his birth, the bell above the village temple let out a long, low toll, as if mourning something not yet lost. Elders whispered that such a bell was not meant for the living. They said it was an omen, a breach, for bells in their sacred purpose ring only at 3 moments in life: when we enter the world, when we leave it, and when the soul must be summoned back from where it should not return. But Arun's birth was quiet, no complications. His mother smiled. His father, the village bellmaker, placed a woven bracelet of bronze threads on the newborn's wrist, a talisman forged in the same kiln that birthed his temple bells. Yet from the moment Arun could listen, he heard the bell, not with his ears, but in his blood. His father, Somchai, worked in a foundry half buried in the earth, tucked beneath the banyan roots at the edge of the village. There, bronze did not clatter. It breathed. Each bell was cast with a mixture of ash, molten metal, and whispered chants known only to those who'd apprenticed under monks. These were not mere instruments, they were vessels, hollow bodies tuned to carry the weight of spirit, not music, but memory. The village revered Somchai not as a smith, but as a spiritual craftsman. His bells tolled at cremations, called monks to morning alms, and sometimes rang alone in the night, as if replying to something distant, unheard. Arun watched closely. Even as a child, he did not blink when sparks leapt or when smoke curled in the air like fingers reaching out. He studied the way his father poured wax into molds, traced sacred etchings around the lip, and paused, always before the final pour, murmuring words into the fire that Arun did not yet understand. One night, Somchai handed him a small cracked bell, blackened with soot. "This one rang wrong," his father said. Arun tilted his head. "Wrong sound?" "No," Somchai murmured. "Wrong name." He did not explain further. The temple bell, the one that rang before Arun's birth, remained silent for years afterward. It hung in the belfry like a watching eye, unmoved by the seasons, untouched by time. But in Arun's dreams, it swung, always once, always just before something ended. He would wake to a silence too perfect, a silence that felt carved, not natural. He did not speak of it, not to his mother, who lit incense each morning and avoided the temple stairs, not to the other boys who played by the river and said Arun smelled like iron. He kept it within, the way his father kept his chants, behind the lips, behind the breath. One monsoon season, when Arun was 10, lightning struck the belfry. The stone cracked, but the bell impossibly did not fall. It swayed, singing a single note into the thunder before stilling again. The next day, a funeral was held for a boy drowned in the swollen river. As the mourners passed, Somchai stood with his head bowed, his palm pressed against the side of the foundry. Arun watched from the shadows, wondering if his father was listening to something beneath the ground. Later, as they walked home through ankle-deep mud, Arun finally asked, "Can bells see the future?" His father paused, raindrops tapping the brim of his straw hat. "Bells do not see, they remember. But sometimes," he looked to the hills veiled in mist, "they remember what hasn't happened yet." That night, Arun dreamed of the kiln glowing red. Inside was not bronze, but bones. Ash rose in spirals that sang as they rose, voices, thousands of them trapped inside the heat. At the center stood the temple bell. It had no rope, no chain, it hovered. And from within it, a single cry, "You owe us the silence." The next morning, Arun found his father sitting before the forge, staring into an unlit fire. His hands trembled, not from age, but memory. In front of him sat a blank mold, a bell not yet born. But as Arun approached, he heard it, a faint hum, the vibration of metal that had not yet been poured. It was not possible, and yet his father looked up and said simply, "You will make this one." Arun blinked. "I don't know how." "You do," Somchai whispered. "You always have." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder, heavy, calloused, warm. "In your blood, you carry echoes." And in that moment, Arun knew he had never been born to live in the village. He had been born for the bells. In the weeks that followed, Arun studied with feverish attention. He learned the temperature at which bronze sings, the thickness of metal needed to carry a soul's weight, and the precise curve that decides whether a bell mourns or rejoices. He learned the chants, not with words, but breath. He memorized the silence between tolls. And one evening, alone beneath the banyan roots, he poured his first mold, a small bell no larger than his palm. He did not carve a name on it. He did not know why. When it cooled, he held it to his ear and heard breathing. From that night on, Arun never slept deeply again, not because he was afraid, but because the bell whispered. Not words, just presence. It never let him feel alone. And deep down, though he would never say it out loud, he liked it.
Arun grew into his father's craft the way a shadow grows into its shape, gradually, silently, inevitably. By 14, he could already read the mood of metal. Bronze softened under his hands as if it recognized him, as if it remembered the sound of the bell that had tolled before he was born. Somchai often watched him work with an expression that was not pride, but something heavier, something closer to worry. The foundry itself was a world separate from the village, a sunless cavern half swallowed by the earth, its floor warm even in winter, its walls breathing heat and incense like a living lung. The banyan roots curled through the ceiling like skeletal fingers reaching for fire. The air was always thick with the perfume of camphor, ash, and ancient chants. Here, Arun learned the truth of bells. "They are not hollow," Somchai said one evening as he tapped the cooled rim of a small ceremonial bell. "Not truly. They carry bones." Arun frowned. Human bones. His father's eyes glimmered in the red glow of the kiln. "No, child," he murmured. "Bones of memory, bones of breath, bones of sin." He turned the bell upside down and set it on the work table. Every bell has a spine, the shape of what it will call, and the metal remembers everything poured into it. Arun traced a finger along the bell's lip. "And if the memory is wrong?" Somchai's answer was a single word: echoes. He didn't explain. He didn't need to, because Arun had already heard them. Each forging began the same way, with silence. Somchai would stand before the cold kiln, eyes closed, hands pressed together. He would whisper a small chant, barely audible, like a secret told only to fire. Arun learned the rhythm of those breaths, slow, deliberate, looping back upon themselves like a serpent swallowing its tail. Then came the ash, funeral ash, not from any specific person, a mixture gathered from countless pyres over generations. It was kept in a clay pot, sealed with lacquer and wrapped in red cloth. Somchai never touched it with bare hands. He used a long-handled spoon carved from sandalwood, and even then, he held his breath each time he lifted the lid. Ash for remembrance, bronze for form, chant for spirit. This was the trinity of the Bellmaker. The villagers believed the ash made the bells ring truer, that it helped the soul hear its name. Arun believed that too, but only partly, because he also believed something else. The ash made the bells listen. And sometimes listening was more dangerous than speaking. One afternoon, a monk from the temple arrived at the foundry to commission a set of small bells for a funeral procession. Arun watched as Somchai bowed deeply, deeper than he ever bowed to the village chief. The monk placed a wrapped bundle on the table. Somchai's expression tightened. "What is it?" Arun asked when the monk had left. His father loosened the cloth, revealing thin, delicate shards of something pale. Bone. Cremated bone. It glimmered faintly, as if storing residual moonlight. "Not every soul finds its way," Somchai said. "Some linger, some wander. For these," he gestured to the bone, "the monks give us what remains, so the bell might carry them home." Arun went very still. "Do we put it in the metal?" "No," Somchai replied. "We let it speak to the metal." He placed the bone shards in a copper bowl and set it beside the mold. Then he lit 3 sticks of incense and placed them in a crescent around the bowl. As the smoke rose, the bone began to crackle faintly, like wood touched by fire. But there was no fire. Arun felt something pass through the room, a shiver of presence. He didn't breathe until the kiln roared to life. When the molten metal melted, Arun felt a tug somewhere in his chest, a sensation he couldn't explain, as though the molten metal was pulling at something inside him. His father guided his hands onto the ladle. "Let it sense your breath. Bells feel fear. They remember sweat. They take the shape of the forger's heart." The molten metal glowed white-hot, alive with coiling ripples of heat. Arun felt his pulse sink to its rhythm, faster, hotter, deeper. He poured the metal. It hissed like a living thing. As the mold filled, Arun heard a faint sound, hardly more than a whisper, rising from the bronze. A voice? A sigh? Maybe. Maybe not. But when he glanced at Somchai, his father's face had gone pale. "You heard it," his father whispered, not as a question. Arun nodded. Somchai closed his eyes. "Not all forgers can hear what the metal remembers," he murmured. "Some craftsmen shape the bell, others, the bell shapes them." He placed a hand on Arun's shoulder, firm but trembling.
You must be careful which memories you let inside you. The funeral took place 3 days later. Arun watched from a distance as the monks lifted the new bells, each one small, each one perfectly tuned, and began the procession along the lotus-filled path. The bells chimed softly, gently, but to Arun they sounded like footsteps. As the villagers prayed, he stepped closer to the kiln, staring at its blackened stones. A strange warmth lingered in the air. A faint hum vibrated through the floor. The bone had spoken to the bronze had spoken to him, and now the bell was speaking back to the world. For the first time, Arun wondered what would happen if a bell was forged wrong, not with the wrong metal, not with the wrong ash, but with the wrong soul. He shivered. The kiln answered with a soft, rhythmic thump, as if someone was knocking from inside. That night, Arun dreamed of the funeral bells ringing beneath the river. He dreamed of bones sinking into mud, whispering up through the water. He dreamed of molten bronze dripping like tears onto the earth, forming a bell with no opening, a bell that could trap whatever touched it. He woke gasping, heart pounding like a struck chime. Outside, the temple bell rang once, a low, mournful toll. No one had touched it. No ceremony had been held. Still, it rang. And Arun, sitting in the dark, felt the sound travel through his bones. Something had begun. Something old. Something heavy. Something that remembered him. It began with a whisper at the door. A woman in white stood beneath the arch of the Foundry gate, veil drawn, head bowed, her sandals soaked in morning dew. She did not speak at first, only clutched a folded cloth in both hands like a prayer left unanswered too long. Arun saw her before his father did. She was not old, yet not young. Grief does that to a person. It softens the face and hollows the eyes in ways no age ever could. Her veil fluttered faintly, as if something breathed beneath it. "Madame?" Arun asked gently, approaching her. She looked up. Her eyes were dry, too dry, like they had cried themselves shut from the inside. "I need a bell for my husband." Somchai emerged behind his son, wiping soot from his palms. At once, his posture shifted, not rigid, but reverent, the kind of stillness reserved for spirits. "Come," he said softly, "we will speak by the kiln." Her name was Rati. Her husband, Saman, had died the night before in his sleep. No illness, no accident, just silence. His body had not yet cooled when she made her way to the Foundry. "I don't want him to forget the way home. They say a soul grows confused if the bell doesn't call it true." Somchai nodded. "He must be remembered, but he must also be released. I want a bell that rings gently, not to summon, not to bind, just to remind." Something in the way she said it unsettled Arun. His father offered her tea, asked a few quiet questions about the date of death, time of passing, and the direction Saman had faced when he died. Arun knew the ritual well. The bell must align with the soul's journey. Eastward deaths meant clarity, westward meant longing, northward, sorrow. "South," she said. He faced the river. His father paused. That was uncommon. South was the direction of detachment, of unmoored spirits, those who had not fully lived or fully left. Somchai placed a blank parchment on the table. "We will etch his name at the base. Once it is rung, It will not be removed. Rati hesitated. Must the name be carved? She asked. It must, Somchai said. The bell must know whom it mourns. She took a long breath. Then, let it be Saman. But Arun noticed the flicker, the way her fingers clenched, the way her voice broke just a little, as if the name did not belong to peace, as if it belonged to something that refused to stay dead. Later that evening, Somchai prepared the mold with slow reverence, sifting bone ash into the mix and sketching intricate runes along the bell's throat. Arun watched closely, but his hands were not invited. I will forge this one alone, his father said. Arun blinked. But I've helped with every... His father shook his head. This soul is fragile. The echo must be exact. Still, long after his father had gone to rest, Arun remained in the foundry, staring at the blank mold that awaited the pour. The metal already shimmered in the crucible, not alive yet, but dreaming. He could not explain why he did it, only that something in the widow's eyes had lodged inside him like a thorn behind the ribs, a small, urgent whisper that said, "This bell must not lie." So Arun lit the fire again, alone, without incense, without chant, without ash. He poured the metal. It hissed. It screamed. Only for a moment, like steam escaping a sealed chamber. Then, silence. When the bell cooled, he lifted it with trembling hands. It felt warm, too warm. He held it to his ear and heard nothing. No whisper, no breath, no echo. Just a quiet hum, like something waiting to be awakened. The next day, Somchai found him sleeping beside the bell. He said nothing, did not scold him, did not praise him, just took the bell, studied it for a long while, then nodded. It will do. Rati returned to collect it. When she held the bell in her hands, her fingers trembled. She did not thank them, did not bow. She simply left. The air felt colder after she did. That night, the bell rang. It was not at the temple. It was not during a ceremony. It rang from Rati's home. One toll, low, mournful. Arun sat upright in his cot. Somchai too was awake, eyes wide, hand clutched to his chest. That was not the sound I shaped, his father whispered. Something shifted. They said nothing more. But Arun did not sleep, because when he closed his eyes, he saw a man standing in the foundry doorway, soaked from river water, mouth open but voiceless, eyes dark with something not quite death. In the days that followed, strange things happened. Dogs barked at empty paths, windows opened without wind, and villagers whispered of seeing someone like Saman, walking by the river just before dawn. He never looked at them, never spoke, just walked southward. When Arun heard this, a weight settled in his chest. He returned to the foundry that evening and rang the small bell once. It answered, not with chime, but with breath, a gasp, from inside the metal. He hid the bell beneath his cot. He did not tell his father, but every night it rang once, not aloud, but inside him, a ringing that no one else heard, a toll not meant for the village, only for him. And each time it rang, a single word echoed in his bones: wrong. The bell had been delivered. The widow had gone. The funeral was complete, but the echo remained. It clung to the air like incense that refused to fade, trailing into places where sound should not reach, behind doors, under floorboards, deep within dreams. It followed Arun, not as a sound, but a presence. Each night when the crickets quieted and the temple drum finished its last strike, Arun would lie in his cot and hear it, a faint ring behind his heartbeat, timed to his breath, breathing when he breathed. He stopped sleeping deeply, not out of fear, out of listening, because the echo had changed. It no longer sounded like a bell. It sounded like a voice. 3 days after the funeral, the village changed. The air became heavier, still but thick. People spoke more softly. Chores were done faster. Even the children, who once ran barefoot past the foundry, now crossed the street, eyes down, steps hurried. Then the first candle went out. It was during a monk's evening chant. No wind, no draft. The candle simply hissed, sputtered, and died, while the bell Arun had forged for Saman began to hum. It sat inside the temple now, hung beside the shrine, never touched since the funeral, and yet it vibrated faintly, just enough to rattle the metal base against the wooden beam. The monks examined it. None could explain. Perhaps a flaw in the casting, one said. But Samchai said nothing, and Arun, he already knew. That night, Arun walked the river path alone. The air was cold, the kind of cold that lives in the bones, not the skin. Mist curled like smoke over the water. The moon was half hidden behind clouds, and beside the bank, just beneath the old fig tree, someone stood, motionless, facing the water, barefoot, soaked. The man did not turn, but Arun knew him, not by his face, which he could not see, but by the way the mist clung to him like memory, by the silence that wrapped around him like mourning cloth. "Saman," Arun whispered. The man turned, and his face was Arun's. Not exactly, but close enough to chill the breath in his lungs. The eyes were darker, the mouth stitched by shadow, but it was his own face, aged not by time, but by sorrow. The figure blinked once, slowly, then faded. Not stepped away, not ran, just dissolved into the mist, as if he had never been fully there. Arun returned to the foundry and searched beneath his cot. The bell was gone. He didn't scream, didn't panic. He simply sat there for a long time, his hands on his knees, eyes staring into the dark, listening. And from deep within the kiln, cold and unlit, he heard it. Not a ring, but a heartbeat. Metal breathing, metal remembering. In the morning, the widow came back. She looked older, her veil darker, her hands scraped as if she had clawed at stone. She wanted it taken down, she said. "The bell?" Samchai asked. She nodded. It rings on its own. It doesn't mourn. It waits. For what? You. Her voice cracked. He speaks with your voice, walks with your gait. When I wake, I see his shadow sitting where you would sit, at the edge of the bed. She stepped forward. I buried Saman, but I brought someone else back. Somchai removed the bell that afternoon. He placed it in a cloth bag lined with salt and ash, tied with red string, and hung it from a ceiling hook in the foundry where no light touched it. Do not touch it again, he warned Arun. But it was too late, because the echo wasn't in the bell anymore. It was in Arun. At dusk, as shadows grew long and the last birds hushed, Arun heard a whisper inside his left ear, not outside, not imagined, inside. It said, "You rang me wrong." He turned. No one, just the forge cold, just the bell molds waiting. But the voice came again. "You rang me wrong. You did not ask permission. You called what should not answer." Arun backed away from the foundry. Outside, the wind picked up, dry leaves swirled, the banyan roots creaked like a warning. The voice followed him home. It never shouted, it never begged, it simply echoed. Every time he stepped near a bowl, a pan, a pot, anything that could ring, it resonated faintly with his presence. And always the same words. "You rang me wrong." One evening he struck his rice bowl in frustration. It chimed and replied, "Forgive me." Not his own voice, not even Saman's, but something between. Something that used his mouth like a mold, his breath like heat, his guilt like bronze. He woke the next morning to find a bell beside his pillow. It was not one he had forged. It was older, rusted, slightly cracked at the lip, and inside it, etched so faintly it looked like shadow, was his name. Not Saman's, not Somchai's. Arun. He hid it beneath the floorboards, but at night it rang. Only once, only faintly, but always at the edge of sleep, and always with the echo that was no longer outside him, but within, the echo that followed. He arrived at dusk, the hour when shadows lengthen, when the sky bleeds orange into purple, when spirits slip more easily between breaths. Arun had not expected a visitor. He had not told anyone about the echo inside him, the visions by the river, or the bell etched with his name that now slept beneath the floorboards. But the visitor had come anyway. A monk stood outside the foundry gate, tall, thin, wrapped in saffron robes that looked older than the banyan roots themselves. His head was shaved, yet his skin seemed to glow faintly, as if firelight lived beneath it. And most unsettling of all, he had no shadow. The evening sun fell full upon him, yet the ground behind him remained untouched, unmarked, as if the earth refused to remember him. Arun felt the hairs rise on his arms. Somchai stepped forward and bowed low. "Pra-Ajan," he whispered, using the honorific reserved only for monks of high rank or for monks who had died and come back changed. The monk inclined his head. He spoke with a voice like rusted bells, soft, cracked, trembling with history. "I have come," he said, "for the bell that rings the wrong name." Arun froze. The monk's unblinking eyes turned toward him, though he had not introduced himself. "You forged it," the monk said. Not a question, a verdict. Arun swallowed. I only poured the metal." "And the metal only poured itself into you." Somchai invited him inside. They sat around a dim oil lantern, its flame wavering as if uncomfortable in the monk's presence. The monk placed a cloth bundle on the table. When he unwrapped it, Arun's breath caught. Inside lay an ancient manuscript, faded palm leaves bound by red cord, each strip etched with tiny runes that resembled bell patterns but twisted in unnatural ways, curling like worms in soil. "These teachings," the monk said, "were forbidden long before you were born." Somchai stiffened. "Ajahn, such texts were buried, burned." "Not all," the monk replied quietly. "Some traditions linger in silence. Some knowledge refuses to die." He lifted one palm leaf with his fingertips. The symbols shimmered faintly. "There exists," he said, "a lineage of bellmakers who forged not only for the living, but for the dead." Arun's heart pounded. The monk continued, "Your father shapes bells for monks, temples, ceremonies." He turned to Arun. "But you, child, were born marked by sound that does not belong to this world." Arun felt the echo stir inside him, a faint vibration along his ribs like a finger tracing bone. The monk heard it. He leaned closer. "You carry the wound of a bell that was never meant to call the living." Arun's voice shook. "What does it want?" The monk placed the manuscript before him. The pages were brittle, darkened by smoke and age. Arun ran a finger across the first line. The palm leaf trembled beneath his touch, as if responding to a memory. Somchai reached out as if to stop him, then withdrew his hand, too slow. The monk recited softly, translating the ancient script. "Metal remembers, sound returns. A bell cast without permission becomes a gate without a guardian." Arun's chest tightened. "What passed through my gate?" he whispered. The monk touched the table with one finger, and the oil flame went still. "A shadow of what once lived," the monk said. "Not someone, not entirely, something that wore his sorrow and your face." Arun shivered. He remembered the river fog, the figure that mirrored him. The monk's voice lowered to a whisper. "When a bell is forged without prayer, without cleansing, without the ash of ancestors, it does not call one spirit." He paused. "It calls any that remembers suffering." Somchai closed his eyes in grief. Arun spoke barely above breath. "And the echo inside me?" The monk finally looked at him fully. "You forged the bell forged the gate, and the gate forged you." The monk then did something strange. He stood, lifted his lantern, and walked to the kiln, cold, unlit. He placed the lantern inside. The flame flickered violently, then steadied. "The kiln is not empty," he murmured. "It breathes." Arun stepped closer. He heard it, a faint, rhythmic pounding, like a heartbeat muffled by stone. The monk nodded at the sound. "It seeks to finish what was begun." Somchai whispered, "How do we stop it?" The monk shook his head. "We do not stop echoes, we follow them to their source." He turned back to Arun. "You must open the manuscript, study it, understand the weight of each strike of the hammer, each curve of the bell's lip. "I don't want this," Arun said, voice tight. The monk's expression softened, but only slightly. "Wanting is for the living," he said. "You were chosen by memory, and memory does not ask permission." When the monk prepared to leave, Arun walked him to the gate. The sky was dark now, the moon hung low and blood-colored. Arun gathered his courage. "Ajahn, when you arrived today, why did you have no shadow?" The monk paused. He smiled, a quiet, sorrowful smile, and for the first time his voice carried warmth. "A shadow is cast only by those fully in this world," he whispered. "I walk between." Arun felt the echo in his chest, pulse once, sharp, hollow, metallic. The monk turned away. "But do not fear," he said softly, stepping into the darkness. "Your shadow still remains." He looked over his shoulder. "For now." And then he was gone, swallowed by the trees, leaving no footprint, no sound, no trace of his passing. Arun returned to the foundry. His father sat with the manuscript before him, eyes haunted. "Burn it," Somchai whispered. Arun shook his head. The kiln throbbed softly, the bells on the wall hummed, the manuscript pulsed like a heartbeat. "I can't," he said, and he realized the truth. The curse had already chosen him. The manuscript did not open easily. Its bindings resisted like a wound unwilling to reopen. The red cord frayed as Arun untied it, trembling under his fingertips. The pages, etched into narrow, curling palm leaves, exhaled a scent older than wood, older than rot. It was the smell of forgotten prayers. Somchai refused to be in the room when Arun opened it. "I have made bells all my life," he said, voice tight with fear, "but not like these." He left the foundry that night without lighting a single oil lamp. Arun remained alone, except for the manuscript, the breathing kiln, and the low, steady hum that had begun to pulse behind his ribcage. Not a sound, not exactly. A shape, a vibration, like a memory cast in heat. The first page was titled, "On the Shape of Echoes." It spoke not of notes or pitch, but of curves, of resonance that did not travel through air, but through soul. Bells, it said, were not merely cast from bronze, they were spoken into being. Their shape was not for sound, it was for return. Arun traced the curling etchings with the tip of a charcoal stick, and a strange warmth radiated through the parchment. Not heat, memory. The manuscript warned, "A bell tuned without prayer may still ring true, but it will call not what is gone, only what has waited too long." He flipped deeper into the pages. Each leaf grew darker, the symbols sharper. Diagrams appeared, strange bell forms, mouths sealed shut, lips coiled like serpents, ribs with too many circles. He found one marked with crimson ink. A bell with no tongue. It could not ring, but the manuscript said it could listen. Another bore a warning beneath it. Never cast the crescent mouth at night. Never hang it near the river. Never let a child hear it first. Arun felt a chill crawl beneath his skin. He flipped further. At the center of the manuscript, a folded page, so brittle it crumbled slightly as he opened it, revealed something stranger. A bell drawn like an eye, its outer lines etched like iris filaments. At its center, a hollow pupil. Beneath it, only one line: "This bell remembers its forger." Arun closed the manuscript and stepped back. The foundry was silent, but not still. Every mold, every tool, every hung bell hummed faintly, not with pitch, with breath, as if they were waiting. For days after, Arun did not leave the foundry. He studied every line of the manuscript, sometimes forgetting to eat, forgetting to sleep. He drew the forbidden bell shapes in chalk on the floor. He sketched their echoes in the air with soot-stained fingers. The bells on the wall began to sway slightly at dusk. No wind, just motion, gentle, rhythmic, pendulous, as if nodding, as if agreeing, as if remembering. On the fourth night, Arun began to forge again. Not a commissioned bell, not a funeral bell, a listening bell. He followed the design from the manuscript, a small rounded shape with a hollow lip and no tongue, a bell that could not ring, only resonate. He did not tell his father. He did not ask for ash. He poured the bronze in silence. No chant, no incense, only breath. When the bell cooled, it looked dull, unfinished, but when he picked it up, it was warm, too warm. He held it to his chest, and he heard it, not ringing, repeating something he had whispered weeks ago. "What passed through my gate?" He dropped it. The bell rolled in a circle and stopped facing him. He stared into its mouth, but it was not empty. Inside, thin streaks of soot had formed the shape of an eye. Not painted, formed. And behind it, a flicker, a gleam, as though something stared back. That night Arun dreamed of sound. Not music, not speech. Sound as shape. He stood inside a vast cavern, bells hanging from root and stone like lanterns from the sky. Each one was silent, but beneath each one a shadow crouched, human-shaped, but still. Each time Arun stepped closer to a bell, the shadow beneath it looked up, but not with eyes, but with resonance. And every one of them wore his face, different versions, younger, older, drowned, burned, eyes hollowed, mouths sealed. Each a shape he might have become had he rung a different bell. He woke, gasping, and the manuscript lay open beside his pillow, but he had not brought it there. Its page read, "To forge a bell is to name a death. To forge many is to carry their return. Do not ring what you are not ready to become." Arun began to draw the forbidden bells not on paper, but into molds. He didn't pour them, not yet. He simply shaped their shadows. The bells knew. He felt it in his bones. And one night, as he stood at the mouth of the unlit kiln, he whispered, "Who's echoing inside me?" The kiln did not answer, but the small listening bell on the shelf behind him began to vibrate softly, and from its mouth came a single whisper, "You." The ghost festival arrived as it always did, under a sky too quiet, with lanterns too bright, and prayers too rehearsed. In the village square, the monks chanted in rhythmic cadence, their voices low and soft, like ripples in still water. Children carried lotus-shaped candles down to the river. Offerings were placed in front of shrines, incense, rice, fruits, and small cups of rice wine, left for those who returned without bodies. Arun had always loved this time of year, but this year it felt different. The air didn't hum with reverence, it trembled. The bells at the temple didn't ring in greeting, they waited. And behind it all, a silence hovered, a silence that watched. Somchai urged his son to rest. "You've worked too long," he said. "The spirits don't like obsession." But Arun shook his head. "I need to show them," he whispered. "I need them to hear it." He didn't mean the villagers. He meant the bells, because for weeks now they had been humming to him, breathing, repeating fragments of his own thoughts back to him, as if memorizing the inside of his soul. And tonight, beneath the ghost moon, Arun unveiled the bell he had forged in silence, the one with no tongue, the one that was never meant to ring. He brought it to the edge of the festival, hidden beneath a sheet of black silk. The bell was small, barely the size of a bowl, but it weighed more than a stone. The villagers gathered as he stood before the offering table. Somchai watched from a distance, his face unreadable. The monk, who once carried no shadow, was nowhere to be seen. "I forged this bell for no one," Arun said quietly. "It carries no name, no prayer, no ashes, only silence." A ripple passed through the crowd. "It carries no name," he continued, "no prayer, no ashes, only silence." Someone laughed nervously, but the dogs began to bark. One by one, they turned toward the bell, tails stiff, ears flat, as if they heard something no one else could. And then, without wind, without rope, without touch, the bell rang. No one moved, because the sound was wrong. It didn't chime, it didn't echo, it spoke. A low, broken syllable, not in language, but in feeling, regret, loss, longing, and something else. A hunger, the kind only the forgotten carry. Arun staggered back. The bell rang again, louder. This time, every bell in the village answered. From temples, from doorways, from graves. Some had not been rung in decades, but they sang now, in confusion, in sorrow, in response. The villagers clutched their ears, children cried, and the flames atop the river lanterns flickered once and died. In the silence that followed, a woman screamed. Her son, 6 years old, had vanished. He had been standing just beside her, holding her sleeve. Gone. No trace, no sound, no ripple in the air. Just missing. The villagers panicked. The monks tried to chant, but their voices broke. One collapsed, another vomited black bile onto the ground. The child was never found. But that night, beneath the old fig tree by the river, the widow Rati swore she saw him, not running, not crying, but ringing, as if his ribs were hollowed out, as if his mouth had become a bell. The festival was never completed. The offerings were abandoned. The lanterns drifted downstream, unlit. The chants ceased. And Arun returned to the foundry, carrying a bell that no longer felt like his. It pulsed in his hands. It remembered too much. Somchai waited for him at the kiln. He did not speak. He did not scold. He simply opened his palm to reveal something small, wrapped in linen. Arun unfolded it. Inside was a shard of an ancient bell, charred, cracked, and blackened. Your grandfather once forged a bell without prayer. He thought the dead would not notice. He was wrong. Arun whispered, "What happened to him?" Somchai looked away. "We never found all the pieces." That night, Arun placed the nameless bell in the center of the foundry floor. He surrounded it with salt, rice, and iron filings. But the next morning, the salt was gone. The rice had rotted. The iron had melted. And the bell had moved. Not far, just enough. It now faced the door, waiting. The manuscript had warned him. He turned to the final pages now, pages he had avoided for nights. They were not instructions. They were confessions. Bells forged during eclipses. Bells made with blood instead of ash. Bells hung in wells, in mouths, in hearts. Bells that did not wait to be rung. And at the very end, scrawled, not etched, "When your bell rings without you, when your shadow answers in your voice, when the dead come not to speak, but to become, it is already too late." Arun burned the manuscript, but the ashes spelled his name. And in the foundry's silence, the small bell rang once more, just loud enough for only him to hear. It didn't say his name. It said the name of the child who vanished. Then it said the next name, his mother's. The bells no longer waited to be rung. They rang themselves. At first, it was only the nameless bell, then the cracked one beneath the altar, then the ceremonial bell hung in the monastery hall, a bell forged decades ago, sealed with sacred oil, untouched since the passing of the head abbot. Now it told at dawn and dusk, though no one dared pull the rope. Each chime came without rhythm, without purpose, without prayer. They rang for no one, and so they rang for everyone. In the village, the air grew colder. The smoke from incense sticks coiled lower, as if reluctant to rise. People walked faster, spoke less. They hung talismans on doors, salt at thresholds, strings of red thread between trees, but none of it stopped the sound. The bells echoed beneath footsteps, in the gaps between words. Even in dreams, their tolls pressed into silence like bruises on the soul. One man claimed to hear his dead wife singing through the temple chime. Another refused to eat, saying the sound had stolen the taste from food. And Rati, the widow who had started it all, was found kneeling in front of her husband's altar, her hands covered in burn marks shaped like finger bells. She wept without voice. Her tongue had turned to ash. Arun watched it all, and still he forged. He could not stop. The echo was in him now, deep in the marrow. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He barely spoke. The foundry had become his temple, the metal, his scripture, the hammer, his prayer. And every bell he made now, he made for the dead. He tried to resist at first. He cleansed the molds in blessed water. He painted sacred runes into their curves. He poured bronze only under sunlight. But each finished bell came out wrong. The metal hummed before it cooled. The tongues clinked like teeth. The lips curled in ways no mold had shaped. Some bells wept steam from their mouths. One split open hours after cooling. Its hollow center filled not with air, but black hair soaked in river water. Another rang once and bled rust. His father begged him to stop. "Let it go," Samchai pleaded, voice raw with dread. "Let the silence return. Some echoes are not ours to carry." But Arun only whispered, "They chose me." Samchai tried to destroy one of the new bells, took a sledgehammer and brought it down with all the strength of 3 generations of bellmakers. But the bell shattered, but it screamed as it broke. Not a sound, a scream. It wasn't metal that cried, it was a memory, a fragment of something long dead, now awake. The next morning, Samchai was gone. His shoes remained, his prayer beads, his tools, but not him. The villagers searched the river, the forest, even the monastery crypts. Nothing. Only Arun knew where to look. He returned to the bell that had split, and inside its broken mouth, etched faintly in iron wrought, his father's name. After that, Arun stopped pretending. He poured the next bell with blood in the mold, his own. Just a drop, just enough. The bell sang before it cooled. It whispered as it hardened. It did not ring. It remembered. And what it remembered was him. He hung that bell in the foundry's central beam, didn't tie a rope, didn't name it, didn't even close the mold fully. But every night, at the exact moment between 3:12 and 3:13, it moved. Not much, just a tilt, just enough for the chime to click. And in that click, Arun heard a name, a different name each night. Never strangers, always someone from the village, always someone living. And within days, that name would vanish. Some were found, others weren't. The bells no longer waited for the dead. They began to choose. Arun kept a journal of the names. He stopped sleeping altogether. He no longer left the foundry. The villagers avoided the place entirely now. They walked wide arcs around it, eyes averted, muttering prayers under breath. They called him Ghost Forger, Death Shaper, Son of the Iron Mouth. No one rang bells at funerals anymore. They feared what else might hear. Then came the night the bells spoke together. All of them. In the foundry, in the temple, in homes. Not ringing, speaking. One single word. Return. And the next morning, the river ran backward. Only for an hour. Just long enough for the dead to come home. They didn't knock. They didn't crawl. They didn't moan. They stood. At doorways, at riverbanks, in corners of kitchens where they once used to eat. The villagers saw them, reflections, remnants. Some smiled, some wept. One mother held her baby again, even though the child had drowned a year ago. But none of them spoke. They just waited until the bells called them back. Arun watched it all, unmoved. He understood now. These were not hauntings. They were returns, summons. Every bell he had forged was a gate, and every gate was open now. He stood in the center of the foundry, surrounded by dozens of bells, each one singing a different silence. And he whispered, "Come through." The bells rang, and the dead obeyed. The temple bell tower had stood for over 200 years. Built from black teak and iron nails, its base was blessed with river stones and monk prayers. Every decade it was repainted, retied with sacred thread, fed the ash of old scrolls to keep memory strong. It had survived storms. It had survived war. It had survived the slow decay of faith. But it did not survive the sound. The night it fell was quiet. No wind, no thunder, just stillness, as if the world had drawn breath and refused to exhale. The villagers knew something was wrong when the dogs refused to bark. They huddled inside, shutters locked, oil lamps dimmed. Even the monks had stopped chanting. They sat in silence, watching the tower, their backs straight, their eyes wide, as though waiting for a judgment no prayer could soften. Then came the hum, not from the bell, not from any one bell, from all of them. In harmony, in grief, in warning. It started like a vibration beneath the ground. It moved through stone, through bone, through breath. And then the tower cracked. No tremor, no impact, just the groan of old wood surrendering. The spire leaned slowly like a head bowing, and then, with a sound like a temple exhaling after centuries, it collapsed. The bell, massive, sacred, older than anyone alive, fell from its cradle, struck the earth, and did not ring. It landed in the mud with a heavy, wet thud, like a heart dropped into a grave. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't absence of sound, it was sound that had been taken. The villagers emerged cautiously. They stood around the fallen tower like mourners at a funeral with no body. No one spoke, not until the novice monk screamed. They turned. He was kneeling beside the bell, his head bowed, his hands trembling. When they pulled him away, his face was streaked with blood. His ears had ruptured. He whispered over and over, "It spoke." When asked what it said, his voice cracked. It said, "He is coming." They didn't need to ask who. All eyes turned to the foundry. Arun did not attend the temple's collapse. He had heard it. Not with his ears, with his bones. When the bell hit earth, a pulse ran through his chest so hard he vomited blood into the forge. It sizzled. It smiled. The bells on the wall rang all at once, but not in unison. Each bell sang a different name. He recognized them. Every name he had written in his journal, every name that had vanished, every soul that had returned or been taken. The names became rhythm. The rhythm became chant. The chant became a toll. And the toll rang inside him. He collapsed, clutching his stomach, shaking with a sound only he could hear. The foundry door creaked open. No one entered, just a breeze. But it carried the scent of teak and wet ash. He staggered to his feet and stepped outside. From the hilltop he saw the ruined tower, and beside the bell, partially sunk in the earth like a corpse trying to stand, stood a man, naked, still, head bowed. Arun knew the shape. He had seen him before, by the river, in the fog, with his own face. But this time, it was clearer. The face was neither his nor someone's. It was both, and many more. A face shaped from every echo the bell had ever carried. He raised his eyes. They were hollow, not blank, empty, not soulless, overfilled. And then he opened his mouth. Inside was not a tongue, not teeth, but just a small bronze bell fused to the throat. It rang. Without air, without force, it rang because it wanted to. The sound rolled down the hillside like fog. Windows shattered, birds dropped from the sky, the monks clutched their chests and wept. And the bells answered, from homes, from shrines, from the Foundry, a symphony of guilt and grief, each ring a confession, each toll a hand pulling something back into the world. Arun fell to his knees, his shadow stretched unnaturally long, stretching toward the temple ruins. The man at the bell did not move, but his eyes locked with Arun's, and his mouth whispered, "You shaped me." Later, when the villagers arrived, the man was gone. Only the imprint of feet remained in the mud, not one set, but many, overlapping, circling, converging into a single point. No one spoke of it. But the next morning, an elder hung himself from the banyan tree. No note, only a bell tied to his ankle. It rang with the morning breeze. That night, Arun found a bell outside the foundry door. It was small, crude, not one of his, but etched on its lip was the word, "Forgive." He picked it up. It rang once, and behind him, in the darkened forge, someone breathed in. The next bell Arun forged was never poured, because it spoke to him before it became metal. It began when he opened the mold, a new design, one not from the manuscript, but from a dream. He had seen it in sleep, coiled in shadow. Its lip curved like a broken jaw. Its rim was jagged. Its body was not symmetrical. And inside the hollow space, etched in dream fire, were 4 lines. Not a name, not a prayer, but a sentence. Arun remembered none of the words when he woke, but his hands did. They carved the mold without hesitation, fingers blistering from speed, knuckles split from pressure. By the time he stopped, it was dusk. His arms shook, his mouth was dry, and the mold was ready. He stared at it in silence. The foundry had gone cold, but sweat still clung to his back. There was nothing inside the mold. No bronze, no blood, no ash. Just empty clay. Yet it pulsed. As if something beneath the clay breathed. As if the shape itself had memory. He leaned closer. The mold whispered. Not loud, not with a voice, but with a pull. A gravity made of sound that hadn't yet been made. A bell that hadn't yet been born. He placed his ear against the surface, and inside he heard his father's voice. Not words, not a sentence, a memory. His father humming as he polished a bell, the smell of metal and oil in the air, Arun as a child, watching, mimicking the motion. And then, a second voice, layered beneath it, his mother, soft, crying, saying his name over and over, but distorted, as if said through metal. Then, silence, and finally, something else, a voice he had never heard before, one that sounded like his but wasn't, a voice that used his throat but not his soul. And it said, "We remember the sound of your guilt." Arun stumbled back, breath shaking. The mold remained unmoved, but it had spoken, not of the past, of the price. He looked around. The bells on the shelves had turned slightly, all facing the mold. Some quivered, some wept condensation down their throats as if crying without tears. Arun touched the mold again, just one fingertip, and inside, a chant began. Low, unholy, wrong. It wasn't words, it was sound shaped into meaning, sound with teeth, sound that wanted out. He sealed the mold. He wrapped it in cloth. He buried it beneath ash and coal. He tried to forget it. But at night, his dreams returned. Each time the same image, the mold cracking open, not from outside, but from within. And inside, not bronze, but himself, curled, cold, mouth open, and from that mouth the voice spoke again. "You are the mold now." He stumbled back, breath shaking, but the mold remained unmoved. But it had spoken, not of the past, of the price. He looked around. The bells on the shelves had turned slightly, all facing the mold. Some quivered, some wept condensation down their throats as if crying without tears. Arun touched the mold again, just one fingertip, and inside, a chant began. Low, unholy, wrong. It wasn't words, it was sound shaped into meaning, sound with teeth, sound that wanted out. He sealed the mold. He wrapped it in cloth. He buried it beneath ash and coal. He tried to forget it. But at night, his dreams returned. Each time the same image, the mold cracking open, not from outside, but from within. And inside, not bronze, but himself, curled, cold, mouth open, and from that mouth the voice spoke again. "You are the mold now." He had sleepwalked to the foundry, unwrapped the mold, lit the fire. The crucible glowed, ready to pour. His legs shook, his stomach turned, and still he reached for the ladle. The metal hissed. It smelled like blood, like old incense, like river rot. He raised the ladle and stopped, because the mold was already full, but he hadn't poured. No one had. And the metal inside, it moved, not like liquid, like a thing alive. He screamed. He tried to destroy it, hammered it, burned it, smashed it against stone. The mold cracked, but instead of breaking apart, it bled. A thick black liquid seeped from the seams, hissing as it touched air. It pooled on the floor, and in its surface, he saw a reflection, not of himself, but of a younger boy, one who never rang the first bell, one who never poured the metal without prayer, one who still had a father, still had a name. The boy smiled and whispered, This is the sound of what you should have been." The bells screamed, all of them, at once, a violent, discordant roar that shook the walls, cracked the shelves, shattered glass. Arun fell to his knees, covering his ears, but the sound wasn't in the air. It was in him. His ribs hummed, his spine shook, his lungs pulsed like struck drums. He opened his mouth to scream, and a bell rang out. Not with his voice, with his breath. The sound flew from his throat like a name escaping the afterlife. And somewhere far away, a door opened. That night, the village river dried, not fully, just a narrow path of wet stones where the water had always run deepest. The monks followed it upstream. At the source, they found bones, dozens, and in the center, half buried in mud, was a bell. Small, unforged, unfinished, still inside the mold, but not made by human hands. Etched onto its surface was a single word, written backward, as if meant to be read only by the dead. Arun. He no longer slept. He no longer ate. He no longer forged. He sat in silence, in a room of bells that breathed, and at his feet, the cracked mold hissed. It had no metal inside it now, but when he leaned down to listen, the voice still came. "We shaped you from silence, and now we ring you in return." Arun had forged bells for the living, then for the dead. Now he forged a bell for no one. A bell without a name, without prayer, without purpose, only presence. He began at dusk as the last chant faded from the monastery and the wind refused to move the leaves. He did not clean the mold. He did not lay ash. He did not burn incense. He only whispered. Not words, not language, just rhythm. A memory of breath forged into syllables, soft as the scrape of bone against bronze. The fire in the kiln flared without spark. The crucible rose in heat before he fed it metal. The forge wanted this bell. And Arun, no longer sure where his body ended and the sound began, obeyed. He poured the molten bronze into a mold he had shaped with bare hands, eyes closed, fingers guided by dreams not his own. The metal hissed, it spat, it writhed in the cast like something alive. When it cooled, he did not lift it. He bowed, not in reverence, in resignation, because this bell was not a tool, it was a threshold. He did not etch a name, he did not test its ring. He simply carried it, barefoot, silent, to the center of the village. No one stopped him, no one dared. They watched from behind curtains, from rooftops, from the cracks in doors. The monks followed behind him, but did not speak. They carried no incense, only silence. Arun reached the temple ruins. The fallen bell tower was still crumbled into the soil, its great bell now rusting in the mud. He climbed atop the wreckage, stood beneath the blood-colored moon, and hung the nameless bell from a single beam of burnt teak still standing. No rope, no chain, just thread, woven from his own hair, knotted with red string once used in funerals. He stepped back. The air held its breath, and the bell rang. It did not chime. It vibrated, low, dense, like thunder beneath the earth. And with it came the wind. For the first time in weeks, the wind howled, but it carried no leaves, no dust. It carried voices, hundreds, thousands, all layered, all echoing from behind the veil of time. Every name Arun had written, every soul that had walked the river path, every silence that had begged to be remembered. They came. They arrived not in procession. They emerged from the ground, from trees, from bell mouths, from puddles of reflection in temple stone. The dead. But not twisted, not monstrous. Familiar, beautiful, terrible. Each wore the form they had last held, but their eyes glowed with memory, not light. They did not speak. They rang. Their bodies echoed, hollow, like instruments shaped from longing. They moved not toward the temple, but toward Arun. He stood still as they encircled him. They did not touch him. They only listened. And from deep within the nameless bell, a single chime rose. You. It said nothing more, but Arun understood. The bell had not called them back. It had summoned him forward. He closed his eyes, listened to the ringing in his chest. It matched the sound in the earth, the sound in the sky, the sound in the bones beneath the mud. He stepped forward, one pace, then another. The crowd of the dead parted, not in fear, but in recognition. He was no longer their forger. He was one of them. At the base of the fallen tower, a hollow opened, shaped like a mold. Arun knelt, placed his hands inside. They fit. The ground hummed. The bells across the village tolled once, and then silence, complete, heavy, sacred. When the villagers returned to the temple in daylight, they found no sign of Arun, only the bell, still hanging, still, not a whisper of movement. But when anyone stepped close, it rang once. And behind their ears, deep inside their bones, they heard his voice. Not loud, not mournful, just present. As if he had not gone, as if he was still listening. Arun was gone, but the foundry remained, and within it something still moved. Not loudly, not violently, but with the gentleness of a memory too old to forget itself. The villagers spoke of hearing footsteps inside, barefoot, slow, deliberate. The sound of tools being picked up, set down, a hammer tapping once against bronze. But when the doors were opened, no one was there. Only the dust and the bells, watching, waiting. Samchai never returned, but Arun's mother did. Not in body, only in scent. Each morning the air smelled faintly of her jasmine oil, a scent long vanished from the village, one that had clung only to Arun's childhood. Now it clung to the air between the forge and the altar. No one lit candles there anymore. No one dared burn incense, because the flames whispered, small phrases, half-finished thoughts, never cruel, never kind, only familiar, like a mother calling you home from a place that no longer existed. The monks sealed the foundry, wrapped red string around its frame, painted talismans on every surface. They declared it a spiritual wound, a gate that rang in both directions. But still, each night, Someone heard bells ringing beneath the ground, not in the wind, not in dreams, beneath the floorboards. One boy dared to enter, a teenager, curious and foolish in the way youth sometimes is when the dead have been silent too long. He crept inside during a thunderless night, carrying a lamp and a notebook. He wanted to write about ghosts. He wanted to hear the echo for himself. He was never seen again. But 3 days later, a bell appeared on his family's doorstep. No name, no inscription. Only a reflection on its surface. It was his face, not smiling, not afraid, just listening. From that day forward, the foundry floor began to swell. Wood warped, nails lifted, the ground beneath shifted slightly with each sunrise. And beneath it, something pulsed, like breath, like heartbeats, like metal warming slowly. The villagers spoke in hushed voices. They said the bells had roots now, that their mouths reached into the soil, into the water table, into the old graves beneath the temple's shadow, not to rest, to remember. One monk returned to bless the space. He brought a bowl of white ash and a staff tipped with prayer cloth. He knelt, whispered old chants, pressed a palm to the floorboards, and screamed. He said nothing after that. He cut out his tongue that evening. When asked why, he wrote with shaking hands, "The sound inside the floor is learning how to speak through us." The echo grew bolder, no longer just at night. At midday, the bells inside the sealed foundry began to ring faintly. Their rhythm matched nothing human. Not mourning, not celebration, not prayer. Only pattern, like something counting. Each chime a digit, each pause a breath, counting down. Inside Arun's old room, the floorboards began to lift. Not break, just curve upward as if something was pushing softly from below. The monks argued. Some said it should be burned, others said it should be buried, but none dared to open the boards. Until one monk, young, newly arrived, unafraid, lifted a single plank. What he saw made him scream. It was not a corpse, not a creature, just bells. Dozens, maybe hundreds, forged without heat, etched with words not of this world, mouths sealed but still humming. And pressed against one of them, a handprint, fresh, as if someone beneath the wood had placed it there only seconds ago. The monks sealed the board. They left without speaking. But from that day forward, every floor in the monastery was covered in cloth. No bare feet, no exposed wood. Because some nights the planks would tremble. And some of the younger monks swore that when they prayed, the floor prayed back. The villagers grew quieter. The river ran slower. No one rang bells anymore, not for weddings, not for death, because sound had become invitation, and invitations could not be unspoken. The only sound that remained was a faint tapping from beneath Arun's room, like metal on clay, like breath on bone, and when the wind blew just right, it carried a single word. Almost. The village temple was rebuilt, not because faith had returned, but because silence had become unbearable. After months of dead bells and closed doors, the monks gathered their trembling hands and rebuilt the tower from the bones of the banyan tree that had once watched over Arun's childhood. Every beam was bound with red string, every stone placed with fasting breath. every floorboard anointed with river water boiled beneath moonlight. They spoke no blessing, they sang no chants. Only one thing remained to be made: the bell. The monks came to the foundry, not to ask, to plead. There was no forger now, no Arun, only the memory of him in whispers, in shadows, in the echoes that breathed behind every door frame. But still, they stood before the rusted gate, and it opened, not by hand, by will. The foundry welcomed them in the only way it knew how, with warmth, with weight, with the hum of metal remembering flesh. They did not find Arun, but his tools were arranged. The forge glowed, the crucible steamed, and at the center of the room was a mold already prepared. The monks wept, not from fear, not from joy, from recognition. The mold was shaped like a prayer, wide at the base, curved at the lip, etched with no name, only rings, circles, wider and wider, endless, each one carved into the other, like echoes trapped inside echoes. They did not know what would come from it, only that the bell was waiting to be born. They poured the metal that night. The sky was still, the moon was full. The air was thick with incense, though none had been burned. As the molten bronze hissed into the mold, a sound rose, not from the bell, from the earth. A deep humming tone, like a chant with no voice. The monks held hands. One by one, they began to recite the names of the dead, not as a ritual, as an apology. When the bell cooled, it was cold to the touch, too cold. It had no mouth, only rings, carved not with tools, but teeth. The marks were unmistakable, as if the bell had been gnawed by something desperate to escape, or by something that had wanted to leave a message, but had no hands left to write with. The monks carried it in silence to the new tower. They did not bless it, they did not test it. They hung it and left. It rang the next night, not by wind, not by hand, by memory. And when it rang, it did not call the faithful, it called him. Arun returned, not as man, not as shadow, as sound. The villagers heard his voice in the toll, each syllable carved from iron, each breath folded into bronze. They ran to the tower, but saw no one, only the bell, swinging gently, speaking in circles. And on the wand, a single sentence spoken by no mouth. I was always the bell. After that, the tower changed. Each morning, the bell faced a different direction. Sometimes north, toward the mountain where the monks buried their scrolls. Sometimes east, where Arun was born. But once it faced down, toward the earth. And on that day, the floorboards of the foundry shattered. The soil beneath had become soft, as if stirred by breath. Inside, bones. Not Arun's. Older. Tiny bells curled around them like bracelets, each one etched with a different version of his name. Some he had never spoken, some he had never lived, but all of them rang when touched. The monks took the bones, wrapped them in white cloth, buried them beneath the temple steps, placed no marker, only a thread of red tied to the final bell's clapper. And they waited. The bell rang each night at the same time, 3:13. Not 3 o'clock, not 3:15. Always 3:13. The exact moment when the echo crossed back into the world. The moment when the dead were not walking, but listening. The moment when the temple no longer belonged to the living, but to the ring. Some say Arun's soul was never taken, only spread, that he became the curve of every bell cast in silence, that his breath fused with bronze, and now, when the bell speaks, it is not a chime. It is his body remembering how to shape sound. And when the final bell tolls, when the last soul is called, when the echo completes its circle, the temple will not crumble. It will fold inward. And all that will remain is the ringing, and those who once heard it.
It was no longer Arun's village, not really. The river still ran, but slower, as though wading through memory. The wind still passed, but softer, as if afraid to disturb the silence that wasn't silence at all. For even in stillness, something rang, not loud, not constant, just beneath, a low, slow toll, as if the world itself had become a bell and time had become its rope. The temple stood taller now than it ever had before, and at its peak, the final bell swayed gently, even when the air did not move. People no longer gathered beneath it. They passed quietly, heads bowed, hands folded. They did not pray to it. They listened, because some claimed that if you stood long enough, with breath held and eyes closed, you would hear something more than a ring. You would hear a voice. One woman, old, widowed, and blind, stood beneath the bell each morning. She spoke to it softly, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. She said the bell carried her husband's breath, that he visited her in its chime, that when it rang low, he missed her. The monks never stopped her, because one morning she did not return home. She was found seated beneath the tower, peaceful, smiling, and in her lap a small bronze bell she had never brought with her. It was warm to the touch. Years passed. Children grew, and none were taught to forge. The foundry remained closed, its doors sealed with rust and reverence. But the bells inside still rang, not in anger, not in vengeance, but as if practicing a language too ancient to speak, a language of remembrance, of shaping, of calling home. And the name they repeated always, in some way, was Arun. The monks began recording the tolls, not on parchment, but on prayer beads. Each chime a bead, each bead a death, each death a return.
But they soon realized the pattern was not linear. It was circular. The bells were not calling the dead back. They were pulling the living forward, toward something, toward someone, toward a bellmaker whose forge had never gone cold. One monk, in silence, entered the foundry. He knelt at the cold kiln, pressed his hand to the cracked floor, and whispered, "I am ready." The bells did not toll, but one by one they turned to face him. Not by rope, not by wind, by memory. When he returned to the temple, he did not speak for 7 days, and on the 8th, he walked barefoot into the forest. He was never seen again, but a week later, a new bell appeared in the monastery garden, small, smooth, perfectly balanced, and etched at the lip in handwriting unlike any the monks had ever seen. "He heard me." The curse was never loud. It did not scream, it did not devour. It resided. It lingered like smoke in stone, like warmth in wood. It lived in the curve of every bell Arun had ever touched, and now in the ones he had never forged, because the truth was that Arun had not become a bell. The truth was that every bell had become him. Each one rang with the rhythm of his breath. Each one held the echo of his guilt. Each one contained a shape, not of his body, but of his choice. The first bell he poured without prayer. The second he forged without permission. The third he hung without a name. Each one opened something. And now, the final bell, nameless, tongueless, perfect, spoke only when it chose to, and when it did, all time bowed. One final night, the villagers heard it tolled just once, not from the tower, from beneath. The ground trembled, not violently, but like something had stood up inside it. And for a brief moment, brief as the pause between strikes, every sound stopped. Even thought, even breath, even grief. And in that moment, the entire village heard it. Arun's voice. Not screaming, not whispering, not trapped, just ringing, clear, whole, eternal. They say the final curse of the Bellmaker is not to be haunted. It is to haunt. Not out of vengeance, but because he was the last one who remembered the right way to listen. And the bells, those sacred mouths carved from metal, ash, and sin, they were never meant to speak. They were meant to become him. And now, in the stillness between tolls, if you place your ear to a temple bell and close your eyes, you may hear something deeper than echo. You may hear Arun, not calling you, but waiting.